you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Next
you.
report is Richard Valdivia, Business Services.
President Sims, Superintendent Reichman, and Dr. Rex, members of the board. First thing I want to say is that the purchase order is in my in-basket. I'll sign it today, and we'll get that moving forward.
I'll keep my eye out for you.
Okay. So you have my board report in front of you. What I've really done there is just identified some statutory requirements that we have to report to the legislature. And we do that through the regular budget process to OSPB and GLBC. Are there any questions for members of the board or anybody? I'm going to go approve that purchase order then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Ryan Ducharme, Media and Communication.
All right, this is Ryan Ducharme, Executive Chief Agency Relations Officer, and I said my name because I'm following our newly created board meeting production best practices that my team has put forth. And this is just to let everyone know, this was created because we had a lot of feedback from our many hundreds of viewers who watch the board meetings on how can we be more clear so they can access what we discuss at board meetings. And so I will do my best to follow what my team put together for us all. So members, Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, you've all had an opportunity to review my report. Before I open up for questions, the number one thing I like to point out, of course, is the October 20th historic landmark dedication ceremony. Went extremely well. The video that was the main highlight of that ceremony has now over 5,000 views across the nation. It's been reposted on at least a dozen Schools for the Deaf and associations and Schools for the Blind websites as well. And so we're very happy about that. The other things I want to point out for today's meeting is our ongoing efforts to increase accessibility for members of the community who are blind and who are deaf. So at the October 20th event, for the first time in a long time, we had live audio description services available for the blind and visually impaired. And we're very proud of that. And we had several people who took advantage of that service. Tonight, for the first time, we now have captions on our live production. And that in particular is to increase accessibility for members of the deaf community who are not necessarily fluent in ASL. And so we keep striving to increase accessibility. Any questions on any of the items that are outlined in the report?
President Sims, this is Diane Douglas. I would just like to comment to the part of your report, the landmark dedication. That was absolutely a phenomenal event, and I wanted to share with your group that the comments I heard during the course of the day, and more than once, was, you know, we thought we were here about buildings, and it was so much more about people, and it was just an amazing, amazing event. So thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you for your kind words on behalf of the large team of people who put that together.
And this is Lynn Davison, and I want to go along with that wholeheartedly. It was a fantastic event. It was well attended, well run. It just was such a warm feeling. And thank you all I know you guys worked really, really hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Secretary Davison. If I might add that both of you had excellent presentations, that the feedback on the presentations was very warm and sincere, and they appreciated your contributions to the event as well. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Appreciate it. Next is 2.01, consent agenda item. Approval of the consent agenda consistent with board policy to include items 3.01, 4.01, 4.02, 6.02, and 6.03.
President Sims, this is Diane Douglas. I'd like to pull 6.02, please.
Okay. So we would do 3.01, 4.01, 4.02, and 6.03. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve, this is Suke Kniffel, I move to approve the consent agenda items 3.01, 4.01, 4.02, and 6.03.
This is Diane Douglas. I'll second that motion.
Sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. So we will next go to 6.01, information item, introduction and possible discussions of policies JA, JB, JCAA, JE, JFAB, JEA, JICG, IHBE, IKE, and IL. Ms. Maria Murphy.
Good afternoon, that's Alphabet Soup. This is Maria Murphy. I'm the Director for Policy and Government Relations. Good afternoon, President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, and Dr. Rex. You have received the red line revisions of these policies. The public was provided an opportunity to submit public comment. At this time, I have received no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Is there any comment from the board? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Murphy.
Thank you.
Next is 6.02. This is the item that Superintendent Douglas wanted pulled out for discussion. Maria Murphy can present.
Yes, thank you, President Sims. I had some concerns. I know I raised concerns at the last board meeting, and I didn't see any changes to the policy in the area I requested. So I'll make my comments. Again, there's 3 particular policies that I had concerns with, and if there is no change, then it will just be my prerogative to vote no. But one of the comments I had made from last time began with BDF, and one of my concerns was we talk about in advisory committees a written and specific statement of purpose of committee, but one of the areas I had wanted to see addressed was membership of the committee. Also, a bigger concern with that is down towards the bottom, there's a red bullet that talks about an executive session for an advisory committee. And I appreciate that some additional information was sent to the board. It seems like one of the areas is that was an Attorney General handbook that, for obvious reasons, when it comes to open meeting law, defines public bodies very broadly. But when it comes to executive session, if we use the same definitions that the AG uses, it then takes something that is meant to be used under very limited circumstances and gives it a very broad application that I don't think is meant to apply. The reasons for bodies to go into executive session are very narrow. I don't think any of them would apply to an advisory committee, not lawfully. So I think we should strike from this policy that we would even consider having an advisory committee go into an executive session. Would you like all my comments on each policy item, or do we want to then vote or not on them? God bless you. As it may be.
Are you asking if you want to present your comments on each one?
Do you want my comments on, I have 3, BDF, BEDH, and JRR are my 3 policies I'm concerned with.
So, BDF.
BDF, Boy, David, Frank. And
Right.
that's with the membership to the committees and advisory committees being allowed to go into executive session.
Okay. And then what's the next policy you want to talk about?
BEDH.
Okay, go ahead and,
And this talks about public participation at board meetings, and I know I got some feedback on it, and the reason the board does it. That the first call, second call, my personal preference is that our members of the community, for the board's sake, are able to give feedback during an agenda item. So if the board wants it differently, that's fine, I don't have a problem, but I don't support that, so I want the opportunity to vote against it. I also noticed in that policy, we left in that,
sorry about that.
that's okay, that request to speak must be put in prior to the start of the meeting, and I believe it was you also that explained last time that so it doesn't become so cumbersome, but my preference is that if a member is in the audience and decides during the course of a discussion of the board that they want to provide some thoughts on it, I would appreciate that we always give them the latitude to do so. And the last one that I had comment on is JRR. And this talks about student surveys, and I don't believe that we go far enough. There's a lot of concerns I can share with my fellow board members out in the community among parents about the type of surveys that their children are subjected to and the type of information that they collect, and where the legislature made an attempt last year to give parents more protection under statute, it didn't go quite as far, and this, as long as we get permission at the beginning of the year, then we can give any child a survey. To me, that's not adequate protection of parents' rights. And some of the things we say in our statute that some of the characteristics that are listed in statute, we don't mention them. Some of these surveys go into areas of political affiliations, religious practice, sexual behaviors and attitudes, voting history, gun ownership. These are some of the things that have been concern of the legislature that students being surveyed about. And I hope the legislature goes farther this session in protecting parents' rights, but I think we as a board should go as far as we can. So I think I had made these same recommendations at the last board meeting. They were not incorporated into the policy changes, so primarily I pulled this policy so that at least to those three policy recommendations I can vote no, and my board members, I hope, understand why.
Sorry about that. So I'm not sure, we want to go ahead and approve, take out those three agenda items, and we'll vote on those first. How's that? In other words, how about a motion to adopt EEC, DEDA, EEAA, IHANC, IKF, and KFAA.
This is Lynn. I will make a motion to approve the items that Dr. Sims so graciously enumerated.
Do we have a second?
This is Suke Kneifel, I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Okay, and then in terms of the other three, any motion?
This is Bill Gibney. I have a question. What's the process to rewrite these, like Diane suggested?
I think you can do a motion to do that. You can do a motion to send it back to the administration to modify them as such. You could do a motion to pass them in their current state.
Mr. President, this is Dean Howard. I have a question. And I don't know if it's
Sure.
directed through you to Diane Douglas. I don't know the procedure, but my question is, are we building speculation on what the state legislature will do or could do? Or do we have specific language that we want to see?
I would not dream, and this is Diane Douglas, Mr. President. I would not, Mr. Howard, imagine to substitute my judgment or thoughts for the legislature, although I may lobby them from time to time. I don't suggest we anticipate their language. I think in some of these three areas, in the public participation policy, I think we can do that better. So I would recommend, and I don't have exact language here, and in the other two areas, I just think they can be stronger. I think we can build in our own language. Whatever the legislature says, especially for surveys, I think we can have a policy that's stronger, and I encourage that we do in those cases.
Mr.
And
President, oh, sorry.
I'm
This
sorry,
is-
and I was just going to say, the one with the executive session, I don't believe, despite when it comes to the Attorney General's handbook, I think the intent of the legislature was very clear that executive session is intended to be used in very narrow circumstances. And I don't believe, even though advisory committees may be defined as public for the sake of open meeting law, I'm not convinced it should go to executive session. I would never want to see an advisory committee of any board I sit on be allowed to go into private meetings to discuss their recommendations to the board. So I think we can do better on the language in and of ourselves.
Mr. President, follow-up question. On the first part of your statement, I'm going to come back to the open meeting and then into the executive session. Let me start with that. I totally understand that, and I think that we could do language that would strengthen that. The only concern I have is with that first piece on the policy side that you're talking about is, in the event that we do craft language for that policy, if the state legislature comes out in the next session or the session after that, are we going to have to come back and revisit this because we have taken a preemptive strike, if you will, on our policy that makes it stronger than what the current state statute is? I don't want to get in this battle of, well, the legislature's just going to come down and change it for us anyway. Unless that makes me feel comfortable, I say we just move forward with the way the language is written now, in the event the legislature is going to come back and change it anyway. Does that make sense?
I guess what President Sims, Mr. Howard, I guess what I'm struggling with in this conversation is the policy pieces I have chosen to pull, the ones that I have angst with, are three very different areas. You know, I think when it comes to the advisory committees, I'd like to see us, when we give a statement of a specific purpose of an advisory committee, I'd like the board to decide what the membership and makeup of that committee is. Do we have 5 parents? Do we have 2 teachers? Do we have this, that, the other thing? And it could be different for everyone. The executive session, I'm not even sure, again, why we would consider that an advisory committee could have an executive session. The other one, this number 2, quite frankly, is just to maybe get a little bit of discussion with this board before we adopt a policy of how we conduct our call to the public. And I know that it is the way it was, and I'm the new kid on the block, but I think we could do better in some of the latitude we could give our public. And then the last one is about the surveys. And will the legislature change that? They're trying to put more parental protection in. I would guess, if I had to guess, that if they have any more legislation moving on it, it's going to be to grant parents greater permission. We'd probably be ahead of the curve. One of the problems is, from what we saw of the legislative session, there was a bill last year to try to give parents greater protection over surveys, and a lot of the surveys are collected through the different electronic means that schools now provide their students. And so some of the people who provide that equipment and services wanted to see more latitude and things like that. So the bill got a little bit watered down, in my opinion. I don't think it ever hurts us to be ahead of the curve protecting parents and students' rights.
This is Shelley Herwood speaking. I feel like we're jumping back and forth between the three policies, and so I'd like to focus on one policy at a time and then progress forward. So I'm going to talk about the third one. Speaking as a parent, I completely understand, and we do want to be protected. So my suggestion would be to put in additional language to inform parents before we survey every time. And we can do that.
Can the interpreter get closer to the mic, please?
Yes. Do you need to repeat that?
Go ahead. Closer to the microphone, please.
So this is Shelley again. I do want to focus on one policy at a time. We're jumping back and forth between policies, and so I'd like to start with the third policy that we're talking about, JRR, the student survey policy. I'm speaking as a parent, and I understand that we want to protect parents' rights, and so my suggestion would be to add language to inform parents, whether or not they sign and give permission at the beginning of the year, but to inform parents that there will be a survey coming. And at any time, parents can object and abstain from that survey. So at every survey, inform the parents. Every single time that a survey is made.
This is Suke Kneifel. I have a question on that. So can we make a motion to pull JRR and have it revised to add additional protections based on what Shelley said I'm having a hard time finding my words, to inform the parents and give them the option, I guess, to opt out prior to every survey that is sent out?
Yes, we can do that. I would only ask that staff give an input as to the workability of that. And I'm not saying it is or isn't workable, but we would need to know what burden that might create.
This is Diane Douglas, President Sims. I would prefer, if we're going to ask staff to craft additional language, my preference would be that it would be an opt-in permission slip with full disclosure. And I'll share with you my experience in the past as a parent and a school board member. If it is opt-in, the general presumption is if the permission slip is not returned, it is implied consent, when many times the parent never saw the permission slip. If it has to be opt-in, then we have to have the permission slip to include them in the survey, and that's particularly important, in my opinion, when we are talking about surveys that may impact very sensitive areas.
This is Shelley Herbold speaking. And opt-in may be less effective getting a response with those surveys, and parents would tend to, I would think, ignore that and throw it in the garbage. A parent would say no instead of being okay with it, going along with it.
This is Diane. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Should let you get a word in.
Thank you, Superintendent. This is David Nigro. Just the way that I'm reading the annual notification, ASDB shall obtain written informed consent from the parent or student to participate in the survey. So, I mean, to me, I read shall obtain written informed consent as being opt-in. And I guess the second thing is, just to clarify, the specific protections that you're proposing, the way that we have this written is that the informed consent is going to be given every year, and that can be revoked at any time. So if we have the permission slip, let's say for every survey, how is it different from the ability to revoke at any time?
And I'll respond to that. Because we may not necessarily know at the beginning of the school year every single survey that's going to be given. You're just giving under this is a blanket consent that yes, my child can participate in every single survey that comes down. And there may be some, if you have specific knowledge of the content of the survey, you might find objectionable. If it's about one thing, you may say, oh, yeah, sure, my child can participate. But if it gets into some of the areas that are prohibited by law, by this would be for any survey that comes down.
Okay, so,
Data.
thank you. This is David Nigro, Superintendent. Thank you for clarifying. So it is in your position that we would obtain written consent from the parents for every survey and then include a copy of that survey so they understand the scope of the content that's solicited in that survey.
Or at least and this is Diane Douglas again, even if not the full survey, and that we could make available online and say go to, if it would be cumbersome to provide an actual copy, we could at least give the parents an overview of the type of subjects within the permission slip, summary of what may be included.
This is David Nigro, the Superintendent. Thank you for that clarification. So we have at least a summary of the information that we touched upon in the survey, in addition to obtaining the written consent on every survey.
Yes. And again, this is Diane Douglas, and in response to Shelley's Herbold's question, what we found is with opt-in, in order for a child to participate, the school has to have in hand a consent that says, yes, my child can participate in this survey. And I don't know that it would necessarily apply here, but if it's an opt-out, what has happened in districts that I've spoken to, if no permission slip shows up at all, the assumption is it is okay with the parent that the child participate. So by default, a child is opted into a survey that the parent might object to just because they never saw the permission slip.
This is Lynn Davison. I just have a question for maybe Kristen, Rex. You know, what kind of surveys do we give to students?
For students,
Yeah.
I might have to defer to my principals that are here. It could be something as simple as a student council organizing trips or organizing dance. What kind of theme for the prom? That's a survey, and that's part of that process that we try to teach our students. So when you say it, I hear what you're saying, but it also kind of makes me go, ugh. A lot of choice is going to be taken away because if I have to go through all those hoops to get a survey and get my students organized to create the survey to then send out for permission to do the survey, it might take away some of that democratic process that we try to encourage. That's a tough one. So I'm just trying to
Yeah.
logistically figure out how that would work in my mind, and I mean I can ask my principals
Yeah,
too.
I just want
How many surveys they do.
Well, and Member Davis, and you bring up an excellent point. My concern in this policy is not thinking about necessarily internal surveys that the school does or the student council does.
Okay.
I'm concerned, if we can put in language outside surveys by either vendors or government agencies, I'll include ourselves involved, those type of things, because those type of surveys are the ones that tend to delve into areas. You know, I'm assuming if the student council is doing a survey, do you want French fries or sweet potato
Right.
fries on Friday? You know, that's not an area I think this board should delve into.
But if it was a survey that talked about possible drug use that's part of a grant or something, you know how they'll give those to those kids, you know, they do those surveys, and they come from the state. They're not,
Oh, yeah, and
they're not my surveys. I'm just saying, they're, you know, they're from.
Thank you for
You know what
asking
I'm
that
talking about?
question. I
Okay.
know exactly which survey you're talking
Okay.
about, and that's one of great concern to me, even though, and this is Diane Douglas again, I apologize, trying to stay with our new protocols. That is a survey that is of great concern to me and great concern to parents. I know it has great support out there. And was interestingly, the law that we're citing in this policy was actually exempted from this law, interestingly. But I still think I know those are exactly the type of surveys that parents are concerned about because they get into drug use and sexual behavior and things like that. And as long as a parent signs a slip and says, that's fine, you ask those questions of my child, I'm fine with it too. But I do want parents to know that children are asked, or students are asked those questions.
This is David Nigro. Dr. Rex, yeah, I believe that the policy that's on the table now is we'd only have to get the written consent for surveys that discuss the characteristics that are given in ARS 15117. And just reading from it, it's exactly what Superintendent Douglas had mentioned, illegal or antisocial or self-incriminating behavior, income or financial information, et cetera. Other things like where should the prom be might, is not going to fall under that. So we're only talking about these. There are 14 enumerated subjects, which I think would come out less frequently than.
I bet they would. I would think.
Thank you.
This is Shelley again. So now I want to clarify something. So anything that is related to a government agency, such as sex education, sexual behavior, drugs, I do definitely want to know. I want to be, as a parent, I want to be informed that those kinds of surveys are being given to my children. But again, if we're talking about student council or prom events, that's a different animal, and I'm not interested in having the survey or permission slip for that. But I do want to reiterate that I agree with the outside agencies. When they survey our children, I do want to know about that information.
Mr. President, this is Dean Howard. Quick question. I hope I didn't jump in front of anybody. Is that the case on what Shelley just explained? Is that the case under the current language of this statute? Or, I'm sorry, of this policy? That they would be notified under those circumstances that are listed under state statute? I don't know which staff member I'm asking that question to.
Would be Maria Murphy, I believe.
President Sims, Mr. Howard, the policy as it's written states that at the beginning of every school year will obtain written informed consent from the parent to participate in any survey pursuant to 15.117 for the entire year. So if it's one of those 14 enumerated topics under the Arizona Revised Statute, we are required to get that written informed consent. However, I believe as it reads at the beginning of every school year, so I think it's probably a blanket consent rather than each time one of those surveys comes out. I hope that answers your question.
Mr. President, this is Dean Howard again. That does answer my question, and then the follow-up question is, under those situations where we have a survey that is outside the realm of student council or anything else like that, we're going to have to send a notice back home to the students to get that back from them. I'm worried about this back and forth thing about we got to approve every single survey that comes through. There's a reason for that blanket approval. Is that where I'm hearing is that we would have to do this under every survey that might tap into that area of state statute?
Well, this is Bill Gibney. I'd like to know from Dr. Reck or others, how often would these external surveys be required? They're not that frequent, are they?
No, they're not very frequent. Not current, up to date, no, nothing that, we don't get 8, 10, 12 a year or anything like that.
Mr. President, this is Dean Howard again. I move to approve the 3 items in front of us as written.
We have a second. I'll second it. All in favor of adopting policy BDF, BDGH, and JRR in their current form, say aye.
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 Opposed? Actually, I guess I'll have to do it. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Nay, no.
That's 3 opposed. Correct?
Mr. President, this is Dean Howard. That's what I thought I heard.
Okay. And how many, we'll do a roll call, then, please, on this.
David Nigro,
Aye.
Diane Douglas,
And the motion is to approve them as written. I vote no.
Correct.
William Gibney,
No.
Michael Gordon,
No.
Dean Howard,
Yes.
Mark Sims,
Yes.
Sue K. Kneifel,
Yes.
Shelley Herbold,
No.
Lynn Davison, yes.
It's 5-4. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item is 6.04, approval of donations. Any discussion? We'll take the money. All in favor say aye. Oh, I'm sorry.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? There should have been a motion, but we'll move on.
Oh, my gosh.
Uh,
I was like, who motioned?
6.05, short-term program update by David Nigro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board Member Davidson and I met since the last board meeting, and to talk about this this program, we researched similar programs at peer institutions. Aside from Texas, there are several other schools for the blind that offer short-term programs as a way to supplement current educational programs, particularly in geographically large states. We found programs in Texas and Indiana, for example. We could not find similar programs at peer institutions for the deaf. We did find various extracurricular short-term activities, and we're exploring if we could pilot a similar program for our deaf students. I met with ASB leadership, and they're receptive to the idea of the pilot program. They had suggested partnering with Southeast Regional, the SER co-op, that could ease some travel logistics. It could also potentially turn into a day program for the pilot program, so that would reduce some of the cost involved with housing the students. We'd provide transportation to and from the students' homes every day for that program. They also brought me a few potential subjects or topics for the programs. One is orientation and mobility in an urban setting. That's bus travel, downtown crossings, use of a GPS and other telescopic aids for low vision. One of the other topics is access to academic skills with adaptive technology. That could be Braille note takers, screen readers, embossing, etc. One of the other topics is access to academic skills, focusing on literacy, focusing on Braille, and writing adapting tools so they can use tools to improve writing. And then finally, kind of a Braille intensive program where we cover literary Braille, the Nemeth Code, computer Braille, and Braille note takers. So that's kind of where we are. Our next steps are going to be to gather potential funding sources. I'm going to be meeting with Mr. Valdivia on that, hopefully in the next couple of months, and identify some teaching resources and potential students.
Great, thank you very much. That's a exciting initiative that you guys are undertaking. We appreciate your efforts very much. Okay, next item is 6.02, discussion of possible action items to set the calendar for the 2017 regular board meeting. So I would like to make a comment. I'm not sure, given the technological upgrades on the board meeting and the ability of people to attend via Tucson to Phoenix and Phoenix to Tucson, I don't know if we want to have a hard location for these anymore, because I suspect when we put them in Tucson, some of the members will attend telephonically, and I'm guilty of this right now. It may be preferable that they actually come to the Phoenix school and attend remotely rather than telephonically. And I think, from my perspective, that would be a preferable ability to attend. I don't know what the other board members think about that.
Mark, this is Mike Gordon.
Go ahead, Mike.
Being that I've participated telephonically quite a bit, I think as the only Tucson member, I find that, well, and actually also having been on the Tucson campus for several meetings, both telephonically and through video screening, video or teleconferencing, I find that's a pretty good format for people, as particularly nowadays, instead of traveling up and down the 10, particularly when you're on site, it almost gives you an advantage of seeing the interactions in a different way than being in person. So I'd recommend or support what you're saying, in that all that travel back and forth, I don't think the benefit outweighs the onerous nature of all that travel. So, particularly if somebody can come to one site and it's hooked up through video conferencing, I think that suffices to fulfill our purposes instead of being all in one room.
So maybe the answer should be the location should be both Phoenix and Tucson on all of the schedule, and people attend where they are. Any other comments from board members?
This is Sue K. Kneifel. My only question would be is if we had the ability to video conference in, would it still be able to be live streamed to the public?
Yes, that's how we've done it. I mean, it's live streamed to the public, and we live stream to each other.
We're getting a no answer here.
No, okay. Somebody come to the dais and give a comment about that.
This is Ryan Ducharme, Chief Agency Relations Officer. I'm going to hand this question over to our media supervisor, who facilitates the stream on the video production side.
Thank you. Offhand, I know it can be done. We'll need another wired connection, and it'll be difficult for everyone to see. I'm gathering that you want to have video conferencing from people off-site, and then anyone that is on-site can see the video. Just trying to clarify.
I think ultimately the first thing is that people in Tucson and Phoenix can attend with each other simultaneously, and that also would give the ability of the public to come to either location to attend, and they're essentially attending the whole meeting as well. That would be the first step, and then if that could go out to the public as well, that would be super awesome.
I could bring in a Skype call or something similar into the live stream and live stream that and still allow you to video conference. But I'd have to work with IT to do it, but it should be doable.
Well, what we'll do is we'll leave it as is right now, and we can see where we are on January 19th. But ideally, on January 19th, people would be able to attend from Phoenix via video conference with people in Tucson.
Yeah, the way that I'm bringing in the captions is actually the exact same way that we can bring in a video feed for people that aren't on site. So
Am I taking that as a yes?
it should be a yes.
All right, there we go. Perfect. Thank you very much. You guys are awesome.
Board President Sims, this is Ryan Ducharme again, and I'm going to bring in actually Brandon, who's in charge of the audio side. That was the video side, and there are complications that arise when we have multiple ways for board accessibility, not only for the live stream participants, but also for, I would emphasize to the board, the superintendent herself, and how that affects the sound dynamics. So I want to have Brandon explain some of those challenges.
Can I ask an additional question that might be, this is Sue K. Kneifel again. From the video side, I'm understanding that it's possible, but I would be worried that if we were able to video stream between the two sites and the community, would we then also then lose the closed captioning?
That's a no.
Thank you.
The main issue with audio is that we would probably have to double a lot of the equipment that we currently have. We basically have one audio system for board meetings that we travel between Tucson and Phoenix. And so we would have to see if it's possible by the next board meeting to double our sound equipment for live reinforcement at both locations, as well as feeding audio to the stream simultaneously.
Okay.
And this is Shelley Herbold. Can you tell me what the cost is for buying the second set of equipment?
This is Paul Creasy, IT Director. There is a significant increase in cost to be able to do this, and even more so than just dollar amount, is the quality. We can definitely run through a bunch of different types of tests and see what the best feasible outcome will be. without sacrificing too much on quality as well. But there's also a lot of logistic issues. And one of the issues is going to be the difficulties we can do, and we've done it before, with a board member at a remote location such as Tucson, and be able to set that environment. But once you start bringing in public and closed sessions, and then also captions, and there's a lot of other things we haven't tried out yet, or we don't know how it's going to affect the quality. But to get back to the question as far as cost, anywhere in this, when we first implemented this system, it's going to be anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000 is what you've seen right here.
This is Superintendent Reichman. I'm just going to jump in just to let you know my personal preference is that we're all in the same room at the same time. I just get so much more information just seeing you here. Anytime it's remote, it gets lost that I'm not able to interact in the way that I should be interacting. Just FYI.
So this is Mark Sims. I totally understand that. So I think what staff needs to do is talk to or survey the board members and see if they are more likely to attend a Tucson meeting telephonically or in person, because that's really going to give you the answer of whether or not what we need to do. So if we have it in Tucson and there are 3 board members in Tucson and 6 of them on the telephone, that doesn't solve the problem. So we need that information. We need the information of how much it would cost and logistics. And I would say for now, we'll leave the calendar the way it is. The other additional thing I would say in terms of the calendar is I think we need to add a board retreat. And when I say a board retreat, I mean something perhaps on a Saturday, preferably I think in January. We need to do find out when people are available. And this board meeting, as compared to other board meetings, would be a board-only meeting where the board is having a retreat. I mean, it's open to the public, but it would be facilitation of board-to-board interaction as compared to board-to-staff interaction.
This is Suke Kneifel. I do have a question or a suggestion. I'm sorry, Shelley.
No, go ahead.
Can we look at the dates and maybe flip the locations so we don't start in Tucson until we can address this issue of remote a little bit more
Great
thoroughly?
idea.
This is Shelley. I do want to make a comment. We lose interaction with the Tucson community, with the Yuma community, with the Flagstaff community. I feel that it's better for us to go to them, because when the meeting is done, we often initiate those conversations with the community. So I feel that it's better that we go, and I'm willing to go to those different locations. That's why I applied for this.
I don't disagree. I think that would be where we would get an insight from a survey of the board members in terms of their ability to travel to all of these other sites. Part of the Yuma Flagstaff issue was we had a not well-attended board meeting in Flagstaff in July, and then on top of that, the issue that Superintendent Reichman struggled with the remote call-in, and I need to take all of that into consideration. So I think it's very reasonable to flip the location, January Phoenix, March Tucson, et cetera, and then we can get the information from there. I think that's a great suggestion today, and then I would say we should be looking at a retreat in January for the board. Any other comments on the dates or location?
Mr. President, Bill Gibney, rather than have a board meeting and a retreat in January, why don't we have a retreat in February? Spread them out a little bit.
Okay, I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I think people are, by and large, a little less busy in January than they are in February. And I think that we can extend the survey to ask what dates work into February and see what we get the most consensus on. So
This is Shelley.
January
I
instead
like that
of
idea.
half of February.
This is UK Kneifel. I am restricted pretty much starting the 18th of February. I volunteer for tax season with VITA, and I'm already committed for all of those Saturdays from like the 18th on.
The staff will find people-specific requirements, totally understand, and that's why we're going to look for one that is the most workable for everybody. We're going to leave the board calendar the way it is and flip the dates. Is that okay with that? I mean, flip the locations, I'm sorry. Is that okay with everybody?
Do you need a motion? This is UK Kneifel. Do you need a motion to approve that?
Yes.
Okay, I move that we approve the 2017 board calendar year as dates as suggested, but flip the locations and start in Phoenix.
Second. Bill Gibney, second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next is action item is election of a president. Every year we need to elect a new president, so we will open the board for nomination.
Thought we just elected a president. We did.
This is Lynn Davison. I would like to nominate Dr. Mark Sims to continue as president.
Bill Gibney, second.
That's what happens when you're on the phone, Mr. President.
I get it. So,
The early exit polls say you're in.
I'll assume then that the nominations are closed. All in
Aye.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? I appreciate everybody's confidence. As a point of matter for everybody, this will be my last year as the president, so people need to start talking about who would be interested in serving as the next president of the board. Next item is election of a secretary-treasurer. Next item is election of a secretary-treasurer. I'm sorry.
Mr. President, this is Diane Douglas. I move that we nominate Lynn Davidson to continue as Secretary-Treasurer.
This is UK Kneifel. I second that.
Any other nominations?
I move the nominations are closed.
No more speeches,
All-
okay?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Lynn did a great job. Thank you, Lynn. We appreciate your service very much. You'll get a pay raise. You're going to make twice as much this year.
Yeah, I'll give 2 speeches instead of just 1.
Yeah. Call to the public for any comment on non-agenda items.
Nope.
No one.
Okay. Action item 8.01, adjournment.
This is Lynn Davison. I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I'll
We have a
second
second?
that. This is Diane Douglas.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it very much.
Hey, Mark, congratulations to Maria.
Yes, very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Very excited. 7-month campaign.
Well.
So,
Yeah, you're
thanks,
excited.
everybody.
You're excited now. Talk to us in January and February.
Yeah. Well, my calendar's mine, and she disappears. So, thanks, everybody.